Well, hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On today's video, we're going to talk about when is it time to change the blades on the sawmill. So let's change the blade, because it's time. So a question I get asked a lot, especially pertaining to the Norwood, is how often do you have to change the blades, Troy, or how long do they last? Well, that's kind of it's a variable topic, or a variable answer, I guess, not a topic, variable answer. That there are times that I can get more life out of a blade than others, especially if I can't get the cover off. You know, it really depends on what you've been doing with the blade and what you're looking for. But there's some key things that I look for when it's time to change the blade. Well, maybe we should address the obvious question first. It may not seem as obvious, is what dulls a blade? What causes a blade to get dull? Well, obviously use is a no-brainer. The more you use it, the duller it's going to be. Obviously a blade is just simply a series of little chisels. If we want to super oversimplify it, little chisels that are taking out material as it's being pushed along. But there's quite a few other things that factor into the dulling of a blade. Probably one of the biggest issues when it comes to a sawmill blade is dirt, the introduction of dirt. Dirt on the log, kind of caked on the bark itself, can really cause a blade to dull quickly. That the blade doesn't like sticking a chainsaw in the dirt. You're not supposed to do that. Well, you definitely don't want to stick your sawmill blade in the dirt that's stuck to a log. Also, bark itself. Bark has more mineral content in it than the log itself would. So bark itself can be an issue. A lot of guys will actually take the time to strip the bark off of all the logs before they mill them. Now when it comes to dirt, I pressure wash mine most of the time if it's not below freezing, and my pressure washer is going to freeze up. But being able to get that dirt off of the log and even removing the bark will really help save the blades. Well, another thing that can dull a blade quickly is knots. So as you introduce your blade to a knot, just keep in mind you're not going long grain at that point. You're not cutting with the grain. When you're cutting a knot, you're going cross grain. So that's a little bit harder on the blade. Can obviously dull those points of the teeth quicker. And an obvious thing that dulls blades really badly is discovering metal inside one of the trees. That's why you're cutting a tree from somebody's yard, or a fence line tree is something you want to stay away from, because there's a good chance there's going to be metal in it, whether it's fence, somebody nailed up a sign, or they put a big bolt in there for their kid's swing. All that kind of stuff can come into play. Or if you're like me and you're an idiot, you can also run into your guides. Not good for the blades when you try to cut through your metal guides. Well, one other thing that could cause a blade to dull prematurely that not too many people think about is when the blade itself jumps from the wheels. And that's what I like about Norwood. They changed. When I had my Lumbermate 2000, back in 2000, it had metal. All of this was metal casing and everything. So if I didn't get the blade set up right, or I jammed into a log a little too hard and it caused the blade to come off the wheel, that blade slammed into that metal case, and of course it was really hard on the teeth. Now, it's still hard on the teeth no matter what, but they put this kind of a heavy plastic cover on, and the teeth don't seem to dull as much. Now, they do dig into the cover. I've got some pretty good, if that'll show up on the camera, they've got some pretty good perforations that have even come through. So what you save in blades, you lose in cover. But obviously that's really hard on the teeth, and that can actually knock it out of set too, which is a whole nother discussion. So there's some certain characteristics or things I look for in the performance of the mill that leads me to believe it's time to change the blade. Well, the first and obvious one is I just take notes. Take a mental note to say, okay, that blade, 4 logs in, so it's probably getting close. But also look at the characteristics of the performance. So this thing, of course, spits out tons and tons of sawdust on a regular basis if it's working properly. So I look at the size of the sawdust, and I actually look at the distance that it's thrown, if it's not a super windy day, of course. But if things are working the way it's supposed to, our ports are clear, and the blade is nice and sharp, then it should sling sawdust pretty far away, maybe 6-7 feet away from me. If it's just coming out fine, powdery, and just kind of blowing around or just kind of hanging, then I know, well, that blade's not being as effective. Now, it could have something to do with the wood, but most of the time, the blade's not being as effective. There's an issue there. The other characteristic I look for, of course, is a wavy cut. And that's what I had on this maple. I started to get a wavy cut, and I knew I was pushing my luck with this blade. I'd taken it too far. But let me show you what a wavy cut looks like. With the wavy cut, you get the dullness of the blade. You're trying to come through this log, and yeah, I'm pushing on it, so it's got resistance from me pushing. So it wants to try to flex, and I don't know if we can see it here. Yeah. So can you see that gap of light? There, that straight edge, that shouldn't be. So you can see we're really starting to get some waviness there. Go back here, so a little bit. That's really my worst one right there. So that waviness obviously doesn't produce very clean lumber. You get that fluctuation in thickness that becomes a pain in the butt if you go to use that in some other details. So what I try to get in the habit of doing, and I mentioned before, is make a note to say, okay, I'm putting a new blade on, and how many logs have I gone through with that blade. Again, watching the sawdust is my next thing. Now, I try to swap my blade out before I get wavy cuts, because quite frankly, if you take a blade to that dull, then there's a good chance you're going to knock the set out of it, which set is the angle of the teeth, and it helps to have a nice clean cut. So if I knock the set out of that, then that makes repairing that much more tricky. Worry about fixing the set of the teeth on the blade, which, if I can get away with it, I'd rather not have to mess with that. Also, just because of being a creature of habit, also look and say, okay, well, I'm going to swap this blade out once I'm at this certain point. So I'm slabbing this maple right now, but if I was going to square it as a cant, turn it into a square log and cut the four sides of bark off, if I was due to change the blade, I'd go ahead and square it, take my blade off, and then put a fresh new blade on where I'm not going through bark. It's just a preference of mine. There's really no methodology to my madness. It's just, for some reason, I like to start a new blade not going through barked. It's nice to have a new blade going through fresh wood. So what I do with this blade, do I just take it and roll it up here and then toss it over the hill? Well, no, that would be stupid. Nobody's made of money around here. Well, clearly we want to get this blade sharpened, and there's really two options when it comes to that. Or obviously I could just keep buying new blades. Again, nobody's made of money around here, so we're not going to keep buying new blades. But sharpening, there's two options. Do you send this out to be sharpened, pay a service, or do you sharpen it yourself? Well, what I like to do when it comes to sharpening is obviously amass a bundle of blades that needs to be sharpened. So I believe this is my last, really nice organization system there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, it should be 11 or 12. I think there's supposed to be 12 blades there. Anyway, so I've got 12 blades that are dull and ready to be sharpened. They're in here in my wood shop. They're rolled up, somewhat out of harm's way. I've got to get a better hanging system. I used to have one right here, but now there's a freezer here, so I have to rethink how I hang those. So I get all those amassed, and then it makes sense to focus on getting them sharpened. So here is my last brand new blade from a box of blades. It was a box of 10, so this is my last brand new one. So I'm going to put him on the mill, so obviously I can keep working. So when it comes to sharpening the old blades, the dull blades, I've done both ways. I have sent them out to be sharpened, and then I have sharpened them myself. And sharper crap too. Daggone it. I can't talk and deal with sharp objects at the same time. There are all kinds of services out there that you can pack your blades in a box, and that's where the number 10 makes sense. You really don't want to send one or two. You want to amass a decent amount to save on shipping. But you take all your dull blades, you put them in a box, you obviously find the company you're going to have sharpen it, you pay to ship them to them, they charge you a fee to sharpen each one, and fix the set if need be, and then you pay to have them ship it back to you. So there's some definite expense involved in that, but you really get a nice sharp blade out of that. When the box comes back, bammo, you've got sharp blades. But you may not have 10 blades back. You may have less than 10. In my experience, in using those type of companies, they look and say, well, in our mind, if this blade's too far gone, let's say you've got a bunch of broken teeth or you got a crack or something like that, and they think this isn't worth sharpening, we want to save this guy some money and not ship something back that we're not going to mess with and we're not going to sharpen. He obviously doesn't want it back. So there's times I've opened up a box of 10 that I've sent, and I've had maybe 6 or 7. And sometimes I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And other times I'm thinking, I don't know that if I thought that was my best pack of 10. I don't think I had any broken teeth on that. So sometimes there seems like there could be some shenanigans going on there. Now, I looked online just here recently, just because I was curious to see what sharpening services charge, because last time I used one, it's probably been 10, 15 years ago. And they run about $6 to $7 a blade, again, depending on who you're using. So you've got your shipping to and from. In my experience, that shipping should be $10 to $20, again, depending on how far away this service is. So that's, let's say $20. $20 out, $20 back, $6 to $7 a blade. So you're looking at just over $100 there for 10 blades based upon that principle. So that's a decent amount of money to toss out. Now, granted, a new blade, these blades from Norwood, when you buy them in packs of 10, are $24.95 a blade. So it's about $250 for one box. So $250 to get a new box, and then to send that box to get sharpened, you're looking at another $100. So you can see there's some considerable costs there. Well, the other option, of course, would be to learn to sharpen them yourselves. And if you can YouTube anything, right? Because any dummy can make a YouTube channel. If you look, you can see there's all kinds of pointers on how to sharpen sawmill blades by hand. Again, it's a really simple concept. Well, the concept's simple. It's a simple concept of a saw blade tooth is just a little chisel. You need to make that chisel sharp. It needs to have a sharp front end and a honed back end. Granted, a saw blade has a lot more intricacy to it, but that's basically the concept. So I, in the past, have sharpened these by hand, by myself, using a small Dremel tool and a rotary stone, just there kind of dressing up the face, dressing up the back. I found that I could do a decent sharpening on it, but I really lacked a lot of consistency. I can't remember how many teeth are on these blades. They're 144 inches long, and I think they're just under a cat's whisker of a tooth per inch. So, there's probably 160, maybe 170 teeth on it. I have no clue. I don't remember. But, that's a lot of detail to be doing on each one of those teeth. So that can get quite tedious. So in the realm of do-it-yourself sharpening, there are companies that make these sharpening jigs, these tools that are supposed to help make the job easier, more precise, more consistent, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Now, believe it or not, obviously this is a Norwood sawmill, so Norwood makes one, and Norwood sent me one. They sent me the sharpener and the set. So since I'm at my 10 plus, 12 blade cutoff point there, we'll do a video here in the near future of using the sharpener, and we'll do another video of using the set and just show the concept of how we need to sharpen, what we need to focus on when we're sharpening the blades, and of course how this contraption by Norwood actually works, how it makes things easier. And full disclosure, I've owned one of these sharpeners before. My brother has it now because he's got my old mill, and it works quite well. It's been, in fact, my goodness, it's probably, it's 2020, so it's probably 20 years old, and I know he's still using it. And there's some modifications Norwood's done to them in the last 20 years, so the model I have, of course, is brand new, so we'll feature that coming up. Now, these sharpening tools are not inexpensive. They are definitely an investment. The sharpener and the set together, I believe, by the time you factor in shipping and tax and all that, you're going to be over $1,300. So you may think, wow, I can hand sharpen a lot of blades for $1,300. And that's true. But again, that precision, that time savings, when I sit down and crunch the numbers and do the math, it really comes down to the volume of milling you're going to do. if you're going to mill a lot of wood like we do here at Red Tool House, then you're going to want to try to streamline that process as much as possible. If I send out blades for sharpening, and I'm doing that on a regular basis, I think I did the math that if I have 20 blades and I sharpen them or send them away to be sharpened, by the time I'm at my 7th sharpening, if I would have bought those tools, then I would have paid for the tools by the time I'm due to sharpen those blades for the 7th time. So again, it all comes back to volume. If you can get a couple years out of a box of blades, then maybe sending it out makes sense. But if you do a lot of milling and you find yourself constantly shipping blades, then maybe you invest in something like that, or again, learn how to do it yourself. Well, we're going to feature, like I said, we're going to feature that tool coming up, so look for that. And I'm going to keep milling maple. All right, take care, everybody.